It is complex as it is historical. Israel wants security, Palestine wants a state of its own. In this ever-tensive region, this heated situation bubbles over once more, causing mass conflict and also mass casualties. But not for 50 years have Israel and Palestine seen such death and destruction. Tonight, we go one-on-one with the Israeli ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago. Ambassador Itai Bardov, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here with you. Thank you.
It's an interesting point, another interesting point in Israeli-Palestinian tensions, conflict in history. Does this one redefine this conflict and the situation happening on the Gaza?
Well, that's a very good question. And I just want to first say that we're going through one of the worst moments in the history of the state of Israel. And we've had our share of difficult times. But what we've been experiencing in the last few days has just been horrific. And these atrocities are unbearable. Now, you call this Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We see it directly as a conflict with Hamas. We have no beef with the Palestinians. Any Palestinian who, like us, wants to live in peace and be our neighbors, we are absolutely...
But it is important, Mr. Ambassador, it is important for our viewership to understand that the very people that you're talking about from Palestine are suffering tremendously, and this includes women and children.
Well, first of all, let's begin.
So the war is affecting, I say that to say that they are not immune to this conflict.
So let me explain this issue. First of all, I don't think there's any country in the world, neither it be Guyana, Barbados, Trinidad, Tobago, any Caribbean country, that would be attacked in such a vicious way, in such a cruel way, have women raped next to the bodies of their friends, have decapitated children, kidnapping children and parents and their whole families. Anyone would react in a very strong way in order to eliminate the threat. Now, regarding the suffering, first of all, we have to be very clear. When Hamas did this attack, it knew very well that this attack will create suffering among those who are not involved from both sides. Anything that happens is Hamas's responsibility. However, Israel is doing and will do anything it can in order to prevent harm to civilian life. But you do have to understand, Ryan, and it's very important really that you understand that Hamas is hiding amongst their civilians. They're using them as human shields. They're firing rockets from homes and from schools. They're attacking Israelis from civilian populations. Our first priority is to defend our people, but we are doing everything we can in our power to prevent or minimize any harm to those who are not involved. But it is nearly mission impossible because Hamas wants its civilians under its control, wants them to be harmed.
I understand what you're saying, but also when you say Guyana, Barbados, Trinidad, and Tobago, none of these countries lives in the conditions by which Palestinians are living, coexisting with Israelis.
I think we need to do a little bit of a history lesson because I think there's a misunderstanding here. Israel left Gaza in 2005 in its entirety. We took families out of their homes, uprooted graves in the hope, and we were applauded by the international community in the hope that the Palestinians would take this opportunity and start building their own institutions toward a viable state, living side by side peacefully next to Israel. No Jew was left in Gaza. And not only that, we enabled Gazans to come and work into Israel. There was the border with Gaza was open. Hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of Palestinians entered Israel every day in order to work and provide for their families. What happened was that a few months after Israel retreated from Gaza, Hamas took over in a bloody coup. And I don't think that your audience is aware that the Palestinians are led by two different factions, Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, which are literally enemies of each other. Hamas took over in a bloody coup, throwing Palestinians from rooftops, dragging their bodies in the streets, and started attacking Israel. Now, what Israel is doing is, first of all, its first priority is to defend its citizens. And we did not want to close borders. We definitely don't want to cause any harm to any population. However, you do have to understand that we have no choice right now. We are in a battle, in combat with a ruthless, cruel, vicious enemy that has no limits at all, at all. And yes, and I will repeat what I mentioned. No other country in the world would allow these kind of things to happen.
But, Mr. Ambassador, I'd like to give the Caribbean audience a little bit more credit than that. I think this has been an international issue since
I'm giving them a lot of
1947.
credit. I'm giving them a lot of credit.
This has been an international issue since 1947. It's continued over half a century. And more than that, Israel wants security. Palestine wants a state of its own. And in the process of Israel wanting its own security and to ensure the security of all Jews, many people might say that it has oppressed Palestine in that case to ensure its own security.
So I would also ask you to give some credit to the audience and not just speak on a one-sided narrative. It's two sides here. And I would also, one would expect some empathy and sympathy to what Israel has suffered in the last week. It is vicious and no one can, it is incomprehensible. But if we need to go back to 1947, there was a partition plan. Israel agreed to the partition plan. Half of it would go to Israel, to the Jews, half of it would go to the Palestinians. Who were called Arabs at the time. The term Palestinians came at a very later stage because everyone was Palestinian, the Jews, the Arabs, but between the Jews and the Arabs. What happened was the Arab states told the Arabs in that area, leave your homes, flee, we're going to take care of this new Jewish state, we're going to destroy it, and you will get your own state without any Jews left. What happened was we were victorious, and the Palestinian, the Arab side, lost that war. We've proven in the past that we are willing to pay a big price for peace. We gave Egypt the Sinai Peninsula, which is 3 times the size of the state of Israel, rich with resources. We gave that entirely to Egypt. With Jordan, we had a peace process where we're giving them, part of the peace is giving them a tremendous amounts of water as part of the peace agreement and parts of land. And we are one of the smallest countries in the region. We are a tiny country. With the Palestinians, we made the Oslo Agreement. We gave Palestinians control over, Gaza, over northern Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. But what we have been receiving back is terrorism, is violence, and our threats over our population. And whether, people agree with us or not, our first priority is to make sure that what the atrocities that happened last week, which are reminiscent of what happened in the Holocaust, and there are only very few organizations that would ever act in such a way, maybe ISIS, that is not going to repeat itself.
Up next, CARICOM comes under fire. The words that the CARICOM statement uses, veritable colonialism.
Again, that wording is wrong, irresponsible, and deeply, deeply disappointing.
Mr. Ambassador, I imagine that the Israeli government, which has formed a committee to oversee this war against Hamas, have been in touch with diplomats like yourself. What has been the advice from the Israeli government to envoys like yourself?
No, what do you mean? I represent the Israeli government, but we've been in touch with the international community, who are in the vast majority are in such strong support with Israel. Because when you see the atrocities perpetrated by these animals, it is very difficult not to support a democratic, liberal country fighting for the security and the tranquility of its own citizens. It is so right now what we are doing is we're working with colleagues, we're working, with our partners around the world, and I have to say I'm very grateful to the international community for understanding what Israel is going through and understanding that Israel has to make action in order to solve this issue. I just want to add one other point, because I'm not sure really how much people in the Caribbean are aware of what we're talking about. It's such a confusing issue. Hamas, which I took over Gaza in a very bloody coup, in its charter officially says that the only solution is the extermination of the state of Israel. There's no dialogue that we can do with them. We tried that in the past, and this is what we received. There's no
So,
dialogue
Ambassador,
possible.
to be very clear, no one is disagreeing with you with regards to Hamas being labeled a terrorist organization. But I think the concern is, as the concern is for innocent women, men, and children on the Israeli side, there is also innocent victims on the Palestinian side. But I just want to get to another point.
No, but I just want to add to that, that is our concern as well. We are going to act according to international law, but you do have to understand that these civilians that are being put under threat are done purposely. It's purposely by Hamas, using them as human shields. But yes, please.
Mr. Ambassador, part of the integration between both the Middle East as well as the Caribbean, in parts of Israel, there are Caribbean nationals. You represent those very Caribbean nationals that are in Israel and work in Israel and live in Israel. Do you have a count for us of how many Trinidad and Tobago nationals and by extension Caribbean nationals might still be there?
We've looked into the numbers. It's a little difficult to say exactly how many are still there. There are a few dozens from the Caribbeans. Like I'm also in Panama, and from Panama we had a few hundreds. We are supporting and enabling anyone that wants to leave Israel. We are helping them and supporting them. Also, I'm not sure if you're aware, but amongst those who have been killed and kidnapped, we are talking about dozens of foreigners, non-Israelis, who have been murdered by Hamas and kidnapped by Hamas. I'm thankful right now that I haven't gotten any notice that any one of them is from the Caribbean, but from many other countries there have been casualties, and my heart goes out to their loved ones, to their families and their friends.
You have been in touch with your colleagues, as you have said, in Jerusalem. Has the safety and security of Caribbean nationals, including those from TNT, been agreed?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're open, and the TNT government knows very well that they can contact us for anything they may need. But right now, we don't see any risks to any nationals of TNT. And I am in touch with our colleagues in Jerusalem about this, because we are very supportive and helpful to any foreign nationality who wants to leave. And the interesting thing is, many nationals who we offered to us, so they say they want to stay. I'll just give you, again, I'm in Panama. I'll give you an example. There are 15 doctors who've been training in Israel from Panama. They're not Jews, not Israelis. They're training in Israel, but they've grown to understand what Israel is about, because they've seen it with their own eyes, and they understand how just Israel's fight is. They say, we don't want to leave. We're staying, and we're helping treat the injured in hospitals in Israel. And that's just a small example of it. But I want to reiterate, we are very concerned for the well-being of anyone, whether it be Israelis or foreigners, and we'll be more than happy to assist anyone who wants to leave Israel during this difficult time.
The Caribbean community has expressed concern about the events that are taking place in Gaza and by extension Israel. I want to read a quote to you out of a statement that was issued on October 9th. That was the very day that the terrorist attacks would have taken place in Israel.
Now, they took place on October 7th, but I know what you're referring to.
The CARICOM statement read, the ongoing harsh conditions under which Palestinians live in veritable colonialism and Israel's sense of insecurity will contribute to a cycle of violence until those realities are definitively addressed. You called this statement, quote, very irresponsible.
I'm very disappointed with the statement, and I've made sure that CARICOM knows it. This is an automatic response. By the way, due to pressure from a couple of countries in the Caribbean, not the majority of the Caribbean states, which tries to put it in the lens of two sides. We are not talking about two sides. One side, and just before I mentioned that, you go back to history. There have been 5 times we've given proposals of peace to the Palestinians, and they have rejected it 5 times. Now, what we have to understand here, and it's kind of surprising for me that I have to explain this. On the one side, there is a nation, an independent country, a democratic country, democratically elected, that a sovereign country that has been attacked by a terrorist organization. By the way, Hamas was supposed to be elected 20 years ago by their own people for a period of 3-4 years. They've been now 20 years in power with no elections. It's a dictatorship, and Palestinians are suffering under their leadership, under Hamas. Many Palestinians are suffering and are being tortured by Hamas. But this two-sided story has to end. We're not talking about two sides. Israel would be happy to live in peace with its neighbors. We are not looking to live in Gaza. We left Gaza. We're not looking to live amongst the Palestinians. We want them to be peaceful neighbors. It's our interest. And I call the Palestinians, first of all, to speak as strongly as possible against Hamas, against this vile, vicious ISIS, a terrorist organization called Hamas, and to start working together with Israelis in finding a solution to this conflict.
Well, I mean, I know that the words veritable colonialism that the CARICOM statement would have definitely disappointed you, perhaps even gone as far as angered you.
How can it be colonialism when we're the indigenous people? We've been here for 3,000 years in Israel. What do you mean colonialism? There's never been.
Well, they mean by colonialism. They mean by colonialism that the Palestinians.
But I want to ask you: has there ever been a Palestinian state in the past? Has there ever been one?
There hasn't been, but this is this is the proposed solution. That is before the table, a two-state solution. And the CARICOM statement did allude to that. At the very end, it alluded to going back.
So why aren't you speaking against Hamas? Hamas is against a two-state solution. Hamas is officially calling for the eradication of the state of Israel. If you're talking about a two-state solution, then why I don't hear any condemnation against Hamas?
Again, I don't believe that the CARICOM statement supports any Caribbean leader supports terrorism in any form.
But Ryan,
however, there are Palestinian, we come back to the point that we both agree on, that there are innocent Palestinian women and children and even men who are suffering at the hands of this war and who have been suffering, the words that the CARICOM statement uses, veritable colonialism.
Again, that wording is wrong, irresponsible, and deeply, deeply disappointing. And once again, I think it comes out from ignorance, to tell you the truth. It comes out of ignorance. And I want to ask you, what do you think Israel should do when we have this adversary, this enemy, which really has no limits? They've kidnapped men and women, children, young 2 years old children. We don't know where they are, no basic rights. What you think the Trinidad and Tobago would say, okay, let's have a dialogue with ISIS. Let's have a dialogue with these Nazis. I mean, what's the solution? Now, God forbid, any civilian casualty that may occur from this war that is taking place is all the responsibility of Hamas. Do you think Hamas did not know the price that would be paid following this unbelievable attack? And I'll tell you why I'm upset about this. Because when you see the images of the atrocities of what took place, and yet you're talking about colonialism and you don't even feel, the need to, first of all, say, we condemn this terrorism and we support the victims, then there's a problem here. And it comes out of ignorance. And I'm saying ignorance, and
there are victims on both sides, and that is important. That is important to note.
What?
Yes, we understand that Israel has its security as its number one priority, but the Palestinians also, the innocent Palestinians, also have a right to live in freedom.
I'm not negating that. I wish they could live in freedom, but that's not possible as long as Hamas is their leadership there. You didn't answer my question. What would you suggest? Here, I'll give you. You tell me. What would you suggest Israel to do?
The chair that you sit in, what is the way forward?
So right now, first of all, the main objective, and this is for world peace, this is for the stability of the region. The first objective has to be eliminate the threat of Hamas. They're a destabilizing terrorist organization in the region. That should be the first step. The second step, and as I've told you, we've done this in the past. The second step should be a dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians to find a solution to this conflict.
Coming up, less than 2 weeks after the United Nations General Assembly, comes war. You've called for dialogue once more. Is this where the United Nations has failed in this conflict?
The United Nations has failed. We were enabling them to provide for their families. We allowed tens of thousands of Gazans, only from Gaza, talking about the West Bank, come and work in
Is
Israel.
this where the
But
United
first of all,
Nations
get rid
has
of
failed? You've called for dialogue once more. Is this where the United Nations has failed in this conflict?
the United Nations has failed because the United Nations has succumbed to pressure, from pro-Palestinians. And what they are doing is they're enabling Palestinians to continue being the victims and the refugees. And so the Palestinians are the only group in the world that have refugee status by the United Nations, have a specific a United Nations agency only for Palestinians. All the rest don't. Yeah, I mean, the United Nations, we know, is not objective in this issue. But even the United Nations right now understands what Israel is facing.
But
We've been getting support from the
you
Secretary General.
yourself have admitted that the Palestinian people, there are innocent Palestinians that are suffering under the Hamas regime.
Absolutely, I agree. Absolutely.
So, it would be.
I wish we could. I wish we could prevent all. But if we're being fired at from houses and schools, and Ryan, here I'm giving you now the platform. You tell me what do you propose? How do we eliminate this threat? How do we make sure that the security of both Palestinian citizens and Israelis are secure whilst we still have this terrorist organization, this vicious, cruel terrorist organization? What would you suggest Israel do?
So, Mr.
Not fight back?
What I want to get at is that Trinidad and Tobago and Israel enjoy bilateral relations. In fact, trade relations amounted to over $3 million in 2022.
And we were working on expanding that. Yeah.
Right.
But right now,
there have been a lot of conversations and bilateral discussions to expand trade. This war, how much is it going to affect that trade?
It's very difficult. It's very early to say. I think, it depends how long this is going to take and oil prices or whatever. I don't know. I cannot, it's something that I cannot predict. I hope it doesn't have a large effect, but I can tell you, if we don't get rid of Hamas as a threat, then in the future we will have a repeat of this, and the consequences will be even worse for the world, for food security, water. It's better for the world and for Trinidad and Tobago right now that this Hamas entity, that this threat is eliminated.
You mentioned food security, and that's a very important point. What further implications do you feel such a war could have on the Caribbean region, given that there is interconnectedness, although the Caribbean and Israel are so far apart geographically?
Well, I'll tell you, and that's part of why I'm just so disappointed with CARICOM, because we've been working with CARICOM and with the Caribbean countries in providing Israeli know-how and technologies, in building dairy farms, in providing, we have advanced technology, world advanced technologies in food security, agriculture, water, and so forth. And we've been working on projects. We've been training Caribbeans in different sectors of agriculture and water and so forth. And I can promise you one thing: the Palestinians have not been training or not providing any of their know-how and their technologies to their Caribbeans. But unfortunately, they have other ways to influence the Caribbeans. And I call the Secretary General of CARICOM to change that statement, and first of all, to show sympathy and empathy with the victims of this vicious ISIS-type terrorist organization.
Do you feel that in Israel's hour of need, CARICOM has abandoned it?
Look, I'm not going to use abandon. We are friends. We see CARICOM as a friend, and we see the Caribbean countries as a friend. Now, you do understand.
Your tone towards CARICOM throughout this interview has been nothing short of disappointing.
Well, I'm not disappointed with Iran's
very angry
statement.
at the statement itself that CARICOM has issued.
I'm not hiding that fact. I'm angry, and ironically, I mean, I have no disappointment with Iran stating their stand with Hamas. That was expected, but I'm so surprised and disappointed by CARICOM, who we see as a friend, who we are friends with. And that's why I'm angry. I'm angry at friends who haven't extended their hand of friendship the way one would expect, any normal being would expect, at least the amount of sympathy and condemnation against such a vicious attack. That's the minimum we expect.
Have you been in touch with CARICOM leadership? I imagine that you've been in touch with diplomats to try to get Caribbean nationals back to their respective countries.
I made the Secretary General of CARICOM aware of our disappointment, and I'm waiting for her response. I urge her to show leadership in this, and to join President Biden and leaders of the free world and to explicitly say, first of all and foremost, we stand with Israel in this time of need. We stand with Israel when it is suffering one of the worst horrendous terrorist attacks in history. And I hope that I hear from her, but I will definitely be in touch with her. And I want to say again, I'm talking about friends. That's why I'm upset. We are friends, we'll remain friends. But I do expect friends to show solidarity in times like these.
Mr. Ambassador, I appreciate you opening up yourself to a very open and frank discussion on this war. And I know that we will be talking much more as this progresses. But Ambassador Itai Bardov, thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for having me. And hopefully we get a peace as soon as possible.